Hi, Gaye DeRusso here from the Majestic Rider. So I got another question today. How do you get your horse to step pace? So there's a couple things to know before you're trying to get certain gaits. There is something called a gait spectrum. And at each end of the spectrum is going to be a different kind of gait. So at one end of the spectrum you have a pace, and then on the other end of the spectrum you have the trot. The gaits that are desired are in between those two gaits. So after the pace, you have a step pace, you have a rack, you have your running walk, you have your flat walk. Then on the other side, you have, there's a fox walk, fox trot, and then you're gonna have your hard trot. So when you're trying to get a certain gait, you wanna look what is next to that gait, what is most similar to it, so you have an idea of how to get your horse into that gait. So if we're trying to get a step pace, the step pace is close to a pace, and it's after your running walk. So when a horse does a running walk, it's a 4-beat gait. It lifts its hind leg up and its front leg up, and then the hind leg comes down first, and then a couple of seconds later the front leg comes down on the same side. And that's how you get the 4 beats, because the legs are separated. So if you're going down cement, you usually can hear a clear 4-beat rhythm as you're going down. The step pace footfall sounds more like 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. The hind leg and the front leg come off of the ground almost at the same time, but then the hind leg lands first and then the front leg comes down. But they're closer together. And then you have your pace, which is a 2-beat gait, where the hind leg and the front leg on the same side come off of the ground together, and then they land together.
Now he's starting to pace. You'll see him bouncing up and down.
Right.
Together. And then it happens on the other side, so you get this moment of suspension in between, and that's why the pace is bouncy. So with the step pace, there is not a moment of suspension, and so it is usually a smooth gait. Other differences are with the running walk, the horse's head usually is going up and down. Unless it has a very short stride, then it might not have much of a head shake. With your step pace, you're not gonna get much of a head shake. So if your horse already knows how to do a running walk, going to the step pace will not be that hard. But if your horse only paces, then you are going to have to do some exercises to try to separate those legs. So first, let's take the easy one. So you have a horse that just that already can do a running walk. So for your running walk, your horse's head is usually down, the back is round, and you're getting that 4-beat gait. So to get him into a step pace, all you have to do is actually speed him up a little bit and then raise his head up slightly so his back becomes a little bit more inverted than so round. And then again, as you're riding the horse, your body moves back and forth as you do a running, when you're doing a running walk. But when you're doing a step pace, your body does not move so much. If it does move at all, it's just going to be a little bit back and forth, but otherwise it's just going to feel smooth. If your horse has the natural ability, not that hard to get him into it. What you would do is speed him up past his running walk or his saddle gait, and you can raise his head up slightly. So say you're riding this way, raise his head up a little bit, and then close both your legs and ask him to go forward until he's going smooth, where you're not moving back and forth that much and you're not bouncing up and down. Once he has that gait to keep him in it, you're going to half halt, which means you're going to squeeze and relax on the reins. It's kind of like tapping on the brakes. But at the same time, you have to squeeze a little bit with your calves to keep that horse going that speed. When he actually does go into the gait, you want to make sure that he knows he's doing the right thing by, relaxing. So taking some of the pressure off, telling him he's a good boy or girl, or taking a deep breath in and out. All those are going to help him to know he's doing the right thing by taking pressure off. Or do a couple of steps, stop him, pat him, let him have a rest, and then you can try it again. But again, if you're having a hard time doing it and the horse isn't sure, you want to make sure that when he does do the correct gait, that you're telling him, yes, this is it, by rewarding him. If you just make him go and go and go, he might not realize that's exactly what you want, and then it'll be harder to get him in it or to hold him in it. So that's if he can naturally do it. Now, if your horse tends to get pacey as you get faster, then you got to keep him right below that pace, because the pace is the next gait. There's a step pace and then there's the pace. So the pace, you're going to be bouncing up and down. So again, if he paces, you might actually have to bring his head down a little bit. Bring his head down. He might have to round his back slightly to get him into that step pace. And then the same thing, once it gets smooth, relax on him, tell him he's a good boy, do a couple of steps, and then stop and reward him. So depending if the horse is pacey or trotty, you do different things to get him in that step pace. If your horse is trotty, you would take him into his gait, and then if you go too fast or past his ability, he's going to break into a trot, because that's at the other end of the spectrum. So if he trots, you actually want to raise the horse's head up higher. Now you can do that you can lift both hands. You can give a little kind of tap on the bit, and sometimes that'll get their head up. If that doesn't work, you can use one rein and kind of, pull that rein up and kind of tap on that bit to get their head up. And then once their head's up, release. If it goes back down, tap it back up again. So with a trotty horse, the rounder they get, the more you bring their head down, they're going to go more towards that trot because they're rounding their back. So a trotty horse, you're trying to take them towards the other end of the spectrum, whereas towards the pace. And so that's why we want to bring their head up and get their back slightly inverted. So again, to do that, you'd kind of tap them, get that tap on the rein, get the head back up, and then every time he does it, release, keep leg on him so he keeps going for a couple of steps, and then stop and reward the horse. Now over time, even if the horse is pacey or trotty, once you get these steps and he or she builds the muscle, you'll be able to keep it for longer periods of time. But in the beginning, it's it's a harder gait to do for them, and they got to build the muscle up to hold it. So you have to make sure you take the time to actually build their muscles, and then over time ask them to do it for longer periods of time. But the two basic concepts are, if they're pacing, slow down, round that horse out a little bit more. get him to separate those legs. And if he's trotty, raise his head up more, invert that back slightly, and keep him right below the trot. Now, the hard part is if your horse is pacey and you're trying to get it to do a step pace. So the the pace is lateral, 2 beats, and now you're trying to get your horse to do 4 beats. So how can we get him to do 4 beats? So one would just be to slow him down. Maybe you're riding him too fast. And if you slow him down and it smooths out, that's most likely your step pace. The other thing is your horse may be too inverted in its back, and that's why it keeps pacing. So you might have to bring its head down some and ask him to round his back out. Now that comes with training, so you might need a trainer to help you. But if you don't have a trainer, you can use some things to help you, like a running martingale or maybe a German martingale. They work with certain bits, so you'd need to find that out. That's why it would help with a trainer. Or you can get a trainer to help you to teach the horse to bring his head down. Because once you bring that head down and then get him to use his back end more, his legs should separate. The other thing that's not that hard to do is to get some poles. You can get some poles either at some of the feed stores have them. You can get them online, or you can go to Home Depot and see if you can get some poles. And you're going to space the poles about 3 to 4 of your footsteps apart from each other. The English people use it a lot. They're called cavaletti poles. And what that will help to do is teach your horse to pick his feet up and also to separate his legs. Now what you'll have to do is ride back and forth over those poles every day until your horse learns to separate his legs. And that would take a while. It's not going to take one time of it. It's more likely going to take, several months of doing it 3 to 5 times a week. Yeah, keep pulling. Good. So that's another way to get him to separate his legs. Another way is to teach your horse how to do shoulder in or hindquarter in, where you're trying to make your horse, instead of going straight, go a little bit diagonally, and that will also help to separate your legs. So again, going from a pace to a step pace, you have to do something that slows the horse's legs down, and so we get him to do 4 beats with his legs instead of 2 beats. So again, poles, riding your horse instead of straight, but more on the going diagonally, or they call it 2-tracking, to try to separate his legs. Walking over objects in the trail, walking on bad or deep footing can sometimes help separate their legs. Now, there's other people that use lots of tricks to do it. They put a heavy shoe on the front and that'll separate the horse's legs. So if you do something like that, you're always going to be having to put a heavy shoe on the horse, and the horse will actually never learn to do it correctly. So when you take the shoe off, he'll go right back to pacing. So my preference is not to do something like that, but to teach the horse how to actually do the gait correctly. And it helps with his education, because most of the time the gaited horses out there are green, and people did not teach them to gait correctly. They didn't give them the basics trainings, and that's usually where the problems come up. So again, to get the step pace from the running walk, you'd let the horse bring its head up a little bit and go a little bit faster. To get the step pace from the pace, you're going to have to teach the horse to separate its legs by going through either bad footing, over poles, working on 2-track, or making your horse going a little bit sideways as he's walking by bringing his shoulders or his hindquarters over can also help. And then again, if he's too pacey, help bringing that horse's head down will also help you to get out of that pace. So Lunchbox thinks we're done. He is tired of hearing me talk, and you probably are too. So if that didn't answer your question, and there's something specific that's going on, please write me and let me know, and I'll try to answer it in another video.
I can go just a little bit faster. So this will be his running walk. It's not going to be any faster than this. Now he's starting to pace. You'll see him bouncing up and down.
Right.
Now he's better. So if you see my hips going back and forth,
Then he's doing it
then
right.
he's doing the right thing. But he needs to bring that head down without pulling on it. So he needs to be relaxed. And it's not so much like, oh, this bit will